Today, on Independent Wrestling Profiles, we're talking with the Prince of Albania, Berat Gorani. When did you first get introduced to wrestling as an industry?
It would have been around early 2000. It would have been right after I had moved to Canada. So I wouldn't have, I was just learning English still. I was 7, figuring out English and everything. And then you see TV, these action heroes, I guess, big movie stars beating each other up. And you go, I don't need to know the language yet to know what is going on here, right? You're beating a guy up and you're just acting over the top. The first one I remember was The Rock, who made me really like fall for wrestling. And just his characteristics about when he'd beat you up and then just showboat the entire time. I was the little like shy kid at the time in me. I was like, I want to be like that.
So, if you were having difficulty, right, with the English language and you didn't really need it for something like a competitive sport, The Rock appealed to you. But what else was it? Was there any particular matches, performers, any sort of spectacles that really just drew you in and made you want to tune in every single week?
Not that early on, no. I didn't quite understand the match psychology, I guess. I was still just so blown and taken back about it as a kid fan, being so young and going out in the backyard and we're wrestling. We lived in a little apartment compact, I guess whatever it's called, a little compact. I got a little elk apartment, and they had the big dumpsters, and like people would throw away mattresses and big cardboard boxes and light tubes and whatever. But all the neighborhood kids, let's go wrestle and get the video games on the N64 and all that fun stuff. So early on, it was just as like a kid fan and not really, ooh, this one particular match kind of thing yet.
So was that part of it, the social aspect, sharing it with friends and neighborhood kids, something that helped you kind of guide along with that fandom and get more into it as a whole, just because it was not so much the wrestling first, but more a social experience, and then it just kind of grew from there?
In a way, yeah. I think that being so social is the main idea behind it because all the kids were into it. It definitely helped as being this young foreign kid who was shy and afraid to go talk to new people and make friends. Really allowed me to open up and become myself. And if you know me now, you probably would be shocked that I was shy. But I mean, we all, all were probably as a kid. So that aspect really helped. There's just seeing these guys do all these things, these bigger characters in life, and then portraying it out there and then go into like your normal life, I guess, when wrestling was off. It's just, you're like, wow, who are these guys?
Did you have any other sort of athletic background, or was it primarily something that was just a spectator sport and you weren't really involved from like a physical standpoint?
Being Eastern European, we played soccer as soon as we came here. We got put into a soccer team right away. So I played like the Wendy's soccer growing up in elementary and whatnot. I just remember only caring about scoring goals. It's the only thing I cared about, and getting rewarded with a big freezy afterwards. But then shortly after that, when I got into like junior high and everything, I was big into basketball. I ended up getting a big growth spurt, and then just basketball took over, and kind of wrestling actually took a back seat, I guess, and I kind of just became a closet fan in a way where I watched it on my own because many people didn't share that interest with me anymore. So I pretty much just watched it on my own, and then in the public, I only focused on basketball.
Oh, okay. And I mean, that does happen to a lot of people. You hit a certain point in your social development, whether you're a teen, and you kind of, not necessarily that you fall out of love with wrestling, but you get busy with other things, social
Yeah.
life, sports, and things like that. Fast forward a little bit to when you actually made the decision to start training and wrestling yourself. Where were you at in life at that point? Were you kind of past your basketball time and you just wanted to get into it? Like what was the trigger event that got you to actually pursue wrestling from a training standpoint?
Yeah, this is interesting. It was kind of near the end of my basketball. The thing with basketball going, I'd go to college there and I would suffer some sort of injury that set me back, whether it was usually ankles and then knees. And I started watching wrestling more because you're hurt, you're sitting at home. What are you going to do? You watch wrestling. And I just started thinking to myself, where are all these new guys coming from? Like I had no idea what independent wrestling was. And this was like 2015. And I just have seen these guys on TV. So I quick Google search and I found Lance Storm School. And I was like, oh, okay, there's something in Calgary. And then looking more into it, I saw that there's shows in Edmonton, in Calgary, in smaller towns everywhere. I was like, I knew Stampede was around, but I didn't know like smaller indie companies were still doing their thing. So then I started getting the itch, and then I ended up going out one night with a buddy. Okay, I ended up not seeing him since high school, and he tells me his uncle is coming to Grand Prairie, where I lived at the time, and he's a former wrestler, and he's opening up a comic book shop and everything. And I wasn't sure if I would like it, so I was like, okay, maybe Lance Storm, who's a little more expensive, further away from home, everything like that. Maybe I just put him on hold real quick and I check this out, because what if I do like it, or what if I don't? So speed up, he shows up. I meet him for the first time. I talked to this guy for like 3 to 4 hours. First time I ever met him. His name is Tex Gaines, out of Alberta Wrestling here. He did some in dungeon wrestling and stuff. He trained with the dungeon guys. And then he ends up bringing his ring. And like day one, I went in there. And since I was the only one he really talked to about everything, I got the treatment of just getting beat up in front of everybody, just chopped, lit up. My chest was just beat down, right? And I was there the very next morning waiting for them to open the doors. I was like, okay, I'm hooked. And then we ended up training there a little bit. And then some guys from PWA came up there to put a show on. And the ref ended up canceling. And then I got told to go ahead and ref. And then going in there as a ref, you open a whole new world, and you hear what actually is going on in the ring and the planning and everything behind a match. And I think they did 2 shows, and then unfortunately everything ended up going under, and it ended up shutting down. The training facility ended up shutting down. So I trained maybe a handful of months on and off here. There was never really consistency, so it shutting down never really shocked me. But at that point, it was too late. The bug had bit me. I was like, I want this. This is what I want to do. So I fired up the email and I sent it to Lance Storm. And then I went to Lance in May of 2018.
Let's see if we can explore that a little bit, because, I mean, just the regular person hears something like, I went to the first day and I just got beat up like crazy.
Yeah.
And they think, well, I'd run for the hills, right? Do you kind of remember any of your thoughts or feelings about that experience that made you, despite, being targeted and being beaten up and having your chest absolutely bruised, that made you be like, I need to be back here tomorrow?
It was pretty much getting in the ring finally, and just having an athletic background, being able to do most of the stuff, the rolling, the running, even the bumping. It sucked, but I was like, okay, I could learn this. And then at the end, we ended the class with that, where like they opened it up. Anyone want to try anything? And some kids said chops, and they're like, all right. And they bring me up, and like I just kept getting told, don't flinch. But I've never been let someone hit me before. Like usually your instinct is to defend yourself. So they're like, don't flinch. And then I would move. He's like, no, stop flinching. And like it was the smallest little natural like pushback, and then hit me again, stop flinching. And then at the end of it, I just said, if this is the worst, this is nothing. I like it. I'm coming back.
All right, so let's fast forward then. You send this email to Lance Storm. What's the next step that takes place?
At the time, actually, I had a business kind of doing deliveries, kind of like Skip the Dishes, and the Skip the Dishes was catching fire, and they were going to come up there. So I kind of ended up, I had to sell out. I was like, they're just online everything. So I had to pretty much sell my job, change locations. And then I had a newborn. I was married, and my wife's from back home. So I was like, how about I go to Calgary for 3 months and you just go visit your parents for a few months? So it ended up working pretty good. But then I had to just back up and move to Calgary for a couple of months. The good thing is Lance offers connections and people that allow you to stay at their house. So I was down there for 3 months, living at some lady's basement in a single room.
So that sounds like a whole bunch of challenges for me. You're sacrificing being away from your family. You're diving into this after your business goes down. You're staying at some lady's basement. How does that 3 months go for you? What sort of challenges are you facing? What was the difficulties that you really had to overcome to get through that period of time?
The hardest one is definitely being away from family, especially, like I said, I had a newborn. I would have been in May. She was born end of November. So for 6 months, a 6-month-old, and you're just away from them for 3 months. But I knew also that because I am away, if I didn't lock in and focus these 3 months that I'm here, then what am I doing? I'm just wasting time for no reason. Can I really go back and be like, I'm not going to become a wrestler? No, I can't do that. So I just locked in for 3 months away from my family and everybody. So I just went to training every day, went and worked out, ate a little better. I didn't really have many distractions while I'm there. I didn't know many people. Went and checked out local shows, watched wrestling back at the house, and studied pretty much anything wrestling related. I was doing at the time.
So, what were your reactions to the live event crowds and the feeling of an actual show? Because you grew up watching it on television, and that's a very different beast altogether. How was it that you felt when you first went to indie shows and kept going to indie shows and seeing how the fans reacted and how the wrestlers interacted with them? Like, did that change your perspective on the industry?
Like, yeah, as a fan when I started going, or as a
Hmm.
wrestler?
It can be both, right? Like when you first
Yeah.
started going as a fan, how did that change your view on the industry? And then when you started going, as a bit more of a knowledgeable person, part of the industry, how did that kind of help mold what your idea and your views of the industry were versus what you saw on the television before that?
Um, I didn't really go to any shows as solely as a fan because I started going so late and that I already had met some of the guys. So when I did go as a fan, I was talking to the wrestlers before the show because I'd go show up, help set up the ring and everything. But then I would just sit back and watch. And you could tell without even knowing anybody on the card, you could tell who the main guys were, I guess, so to speak, or who would be in the main event or who you expect to be in the better match solely just by the way they carry themselves, their connection to the crowd. And I'm big on footwork. I watch people's feet more than I watch the actual bumping and like everything else in there. I know like facial expressions are good too, but I usually study feet where I'm watching if people are stepping over themselves or what are they doing or if it's clean strides and everything. And that helps me a lot too because I don't know, playing basketball, I watch my defender's feet when he's about to move, right? So I just carried that over and I just watched the wrestlers in the ring. And some guys, even though they were in the main event, I would look at their feet footwork and I'm like, oh, you could tell you're still kind of newer at the time, right? But then you'd see people like everyone in Alberta wrestling will put him over, but it's Michael Richard Blaze. You see him, and I'm like, how is it possible to move the way you move and do the things you do? So he was definitely one that caught my eye and whatnot. So I've been watching him a long time.
All right, so take me through the process to your first match. I don't know if it was a green light process or if it was just a set period of time for training. But what were the events that led up to you finally being booked on a match? I'm sure there was probably some reffing or some battle royales, but like your first actual match, take me through that.
Yeah, so I ref those two shows, and then I was training with Lance, and it was like 2 to 3 weeks left before we finished training. So I guess just over 2 months of training. And PWA had a show just in Wetaskiwin, a small side town here, about an hour, hour and a half out of Edmonton, at a raceway track. And they go, "Hey, if you're available, we'll put you on the card, man." Like I was already talking to the promoter, like after I'm done, I would like to get on there. And he goes, if you're available to come up, go ahead. So I talked to Lance. Do you think I'm ready to have a show? He's like, well, you have the fundamentals. You could probably have a 1-star basic match, so to put a rating behind it. And I was like, done deal, man. Let's go. And I told him, yeah, I'll make it out there. And the rest of the class actually got to go do a battle royale. I was like, oh, I'll go get a singles match. So my first ever wrestling match was for the PWA Heavyweight Championship at a race car track in a main event, and I've never had a match before. I don't even have gear at this point. This is the best part is I don't even have gear or anything. I don't have a character name. I don't have gear. I don't got nothing. So on the fly, they're like, what do you want to be called? And I'm like, okay, well, some people back home call me Barry. I like Barry Allen, the Flash and whatnot. And I was like, I'll just spell it a little different. And then like Nightwing is my favorite, as you can see, he's up there. Is one of my favorite superheroes. So I go Grayson is my last name, so I went with Barry Grayson. And I had these leggings, these space designed leggings that I would just kind of train in, right? And then they go, you can't wrestle in those. So I had just basketball shorts, and they're like, you can't just wrestle in those because those are just shorts. You're not off the street. So they made me wrestle in those leggings. Yeah. Needless to say, wrestling in like spandex leggings kind of material for your first match ever was kind of a humbling experience because you're like, it doesn't get worse than this. I'll have gear for my first match.
And how did you feel about that first match? What sort of kind of feedback did you get afterwards, maybe from your peers backstage or anything like that, or even the audience?
The audience loved me, and it was all because of my opponent who put me over in the match. I was actually against Sheik Shabazz, who's my current tag team partner. Um, so it was in against him, and he had been wrestling a while, and he could tell I'm green and nervous as hell. And there was a bunch of kids out there, and he just starts insulting me and come on, whatever. And he ends up calling me spaceman because I have a space tattoo in my gear, and he's like, "What are you, some kind of spaceman?" And the crowd must have not heard my name in the entrance because all they were chanting was spaceman, and they got behind me all because I was just getting insulted. I hadn't done anything yet. But as far as the actual wrestling and the moves, there was a few of them when you watch back, like strikes. I was so scared to make contact, and there was a few where I just whiffed. I missed completely, but other than that, it was a basic first timer match. I remember feeling great after the match because I just ended it and like got it out of my system. And we actually had a second match, a 3v3, just to send the crowd home happy, so the baby faces and whatnot. So I had two matches on my first show, but I knew there was stuff to improve on, obviously, because it's my first match. But overall, I was ecstatic. I was like hyped. I was pumped. I made the right choice. I'm happy I came here. I got my $20. I'm gonna go grab a burger and hit the road back to Calgary.
So, based on your experience, it sounds like you're perfectly fine diving in and just hitting the ground running. What was the procedure after that? Did you just start getting booked a little bit more regularly? Did you have to kind of reach out or pay dues? Like, did it just become a regular thing from there on out, or was it still something that you had to like kind of chip away at?
Um, I talked to the promoter after that show, and he said, as soon as you're done your training, let me know, reach out, and we'll get you on shows. So I went back. I had about 2, 3 weeks left of training. And then after that, PWA was the one I went with, and they were running 2 times a month in Edmonton, and then 2 weeks later down in Calgary. So every 2 weeks they would run alternating cities. It's about a 3 hour difference, but I lived up 4.5 hours north of Edmonton. So
Oh,
I would, at the first few shows, I only did Edmonton, and I would drive down by myself and then drive back the same night. And then he's like, if you're available, I know it's a further drive. This is why I haven't asked you. You can come do Calgary shows. I was like, I'll drive as far as I have to. I don't mind. And so I started doing those 8 hour drives on my own there and back. And like those were hectic because you really got to be dedicated to do those rides on your own. um, and then it wasn't long after when Nizar there, or the Sheik and Michael Richard Blaze were both like, why don't you split your ride into two, stop in Edmonton, hop in with us, and we'll take you there. So then I started getting more comfortable with far rides. So I started reaching out to more promoters, telling them I'm okay driving wherever you're at. I just need in ring time. So I started doing those two shows monthly and for PWA, and then I went on a few tours for the CWE. Or I think the first one I did was like 2.5 or 3 weeks in 2018, and then 2 weeks again in 2019. So those are a lot of fun when you're wrestling every day, driving to a new town. You don't know what kind of thing you're going to run into. So those helped me a lot early on in my career.
so it's been some time since then. I think this is a perfectly good opportunity to ask you for some highlights that you might have had during your career, whether they be particular matches that you were absolutely, memorable for you, fan interactions, or even just like, celebrity interactions or OMG moments that you weren't necessarily expecting, or maybe never would have happened if it wasn't for professional wrestling.
2018, I think, that first CWE tour, my vehicle is the only one that wasn't breaking down. The ring truck, everybody's vehicles were breaking down. And Psychosis was the headliner for that tour. Big Psychosis fan from WCW. So he ends up riding with me in my passenger seat pretty much for most of those days. And then at one point, we got some more names and guys who came on board. And it ended up being Psychosis in my front seat, Jimmy Jacobs in the back, Killer Cross in the back,
Whoa,
and Michael Elgin, I think was his name.
Elgin, yeah.
Elgin, yeah. All three guys. And I was like, I'm 5, 6 months into wrestling and I'm driving with these guys, and Cross and me were talking pretty much the entire time, and he gave me pretty good advice and whatnot. But like just to sit back and think that moment that early in my career, I was like, this wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for wrestling.
That's amazing. And that early to be in that car
That
is
really,
just
yeah, right. So
okay, so why don't we then focus on the match aspect? What are some of the like most memorable matches that you might have had?
um, the one that stuck out that to me was like the match where I was like, okay, I think I understand this wrestling thing. I'm comfortable in putting a match together on my own and everything. Was a while ago, 2019 or 20 against the Thickness Reed Matthews. In I think you just interviewed him in a singles match there. I think it was just the tip, or Force Pro Wrestling just a tip, or Clandestine Wrestling just a tip, something along those lines. But we was me and him, and I was the spaceman Barry Grayson. I watch it back now; it wasn't the greatest match, but at that moment, I just remember even afterwards, just everything started to click. Like, this is why you do this. This is why you're going to go do there. Mix thing up, and that's what allowed me to go from that basic style of rookie training matches you see, and then start to finally actually figure out who I am and find myself going on down the road.
Yeah, almost like a milestone for you, right? Like it was the moment
100%.
of validation where it kind of all started to come together. I definitely get that.
Yeah.
So let me ask you then, what's next in your career? Where do you want to see yourself go? Whether that's a different company you'd like to travel to, maybe a destination, like a city that you would like to go to. Like, what do you want to check off the wrestling bucket list next?
My bucket list is solely, can I make this a career? Can I live off of just wrestling? That is pretty much my only goal right now. If it means I go to a different company, if it means I wrestle for multiple companies, if it means I travel across Canada, the world, I'm down for it all. Uh, my life at home is pretty good right now, pretty secure. I can afford to just leave for a little bit if that opening arises. But that is pretty much my main goal. I know some people would like to go to certain countries and whatnot, but I feel like I don't want to handcuff myself to just one direction. I'm just going to leave all the routes open. I'm looking around everywhere. I've looked obviously in Canada right now is the easiest because what's going on with the states, it's kind of hard to get out there. But as far as Canada, I've been to BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Winnipeg, Manitoba. So it's like, let's go a little further east. I know some people in Ontario, even the Maritimes out there as well. So maybe that's next for now.
Okay. And I say next specifically because obviously you're not going to say no to any opportunity, but maybe you
No,
have one in mind. I have to do the very cliche wrestling interview thing and ask you, who is your dream opponent? You don't have to make it realistic. You don't have to justify it. But let's stick to active performers. If you could have like a dream match, who would it be against?
Randy Orton. Randy Orton is my all-time favorite. He's my goat, personal goat. I don't know. My very first match when you asked me earlier that I remember sticking out and being like, "This is what I want to do," is when Randy won the title for the first time at SummerSlam in '04. I just remember popping huge for that and going, "Wow!" Like, I like everything he did, even though he was a bad guy at the time. And this when I started watching it more. Is like, what if I ever tried doing this? This is the guy I like. This is who I want to be like. He's definitely one of them. I like Roman Reigns. I like his style, everything. I know a lot of people hate on him, but I love his minimal things he does, but controls everything at all times. He's just never shook or out of position, really. um, as far as being like a local guy here or anything, it's always whenever I get the privilege to share the ring with like Michael Richard Blaze, uh, I always learn something new. Even though I train with him and I work with him for so many years, I wrestle a match and I'm going to learn at least one, probably more than one thing every single time. So
Okay, let's step out of the world of wrestling for a moment. When you are, away from it and you need to recharge your batteries or just fill some time with a different hobby and get away from it a little bit, who is Berat outside of the ring?
I'm kind of a little bit nerdy, sports and nerdy stuff, I guess. I like watching anime, playing video games, and I'm big still into watching sports. I usually follow basketball. I do the whole fantasy stuff every year. I'm let down. But mostly, if I'm at home, I'm hanging out with the family, going out somewhere, doing something with the kids, trying to be a dad. But when it's just time for just me, I'm usually down right here, either watching one of my shows or playing some Xbox here.
Yeah, I see. Is that a Vegeta and a Trunks there?
Yeah, I got Vegeta, a bunch of Gokus, Trunks. Bunch of cans and stuff, some Naruto figures.
Okay, so are you a big Dragon Ball fan?
That's my favorite. I got a big Dragon Ball Z tattoo on my arm too.
Okay, so I've actually asked this to a number of wrestlers because Dragon Ball seems to be a popular one. Um, who is the best character in Dragon Ball Z and why is it Vegeta?
Honestly, I don't think he is the best character.
Let's hear it. Who is?
I'm a big Goku mark still because people hate on him way too much because of the abridged stuff and everything else where they made him dumb and stupid. But my guy is always there. He's loyal. He's a good father, okay? But no, he's just always come through in the clutch. He's going to get beat up. He knows when it's not his fight, where he gives the fight to somebody else, you get a chance to shine. But it'll probably have to be Goku. I love Dragon Ball Z. It's not one of the best written stories. It's just I love the action and I grew up on it.
Yeah, I mean, so did I, right? And I could talk Dragon Ball for a while too. I know I always have to give props to Krillin for being like
Yeah,
the one human that can actually stand toe
keep
to
up
toe
with
with all
everybody.
of these
Yeah,
people. But I just love the dynamic with Vegeta, and in the end, he ends up being a good father, but
yeah.
maybe not as immediately as Goku does. So just to go back to wrestling before we close out here, I like to ask this question, and it's sometimes a little bit more of a challenging one. If you had an opportunity to go back and talk to a younger version of yourself when you were just starting to get into the training, or maybe even when you were just contemplating it before you got into it, what piece of advice would you give yourself that could maybe assist somebody else who could be in the same boat?
I would have got into this a lot earlier. I would have just been like, listen, if it's this is your dream, just go ahead and do it. There's a lot of like, what if there's nothing around? What if I fail? It's risky, you know. It's a very dangerous sport. We're doing live stunts every time, right? And that fear of being injured or hurt is always at the back of your mind, and that also stopped me early on. And it just was like being unable and uncertain to decide on what I wanted to chase. Being that I just did decide with wrestling, I would definitely tell my younger self, hey, don't just listen to your surroundings and the people you're around because sure, wrestling is not that popular right now, but you're still watching it every single weekend by yourself, trying to hide it from people, you know, like, and then you go play basketball the rest of the time. Just listen to your heart, and this is what you wanted to do. You should have probably done it a little bit earlier.
I actually like that part about the injuries because not a lot of people bring it up, but a lot of the times that hesitation, that fear of injury is what causes people to slip up and make a mistake, and then ultimately, ironically, causes injuries. So I think
Yeah,
that that's a very important thing for people to pay attention. And I'm sure that that's probably common for you because that's a similar thing in like basketball as well. Like you can get injured if you are hesitant. Um, Thank you so much for doing this. Before we sign out, can you just let people know once again who you are and maybe where they can follow you on social media if they just want to see what you're up to?
that's fair. I am the Prince of Albania Berat Gorani. On Instagram, it is Berat Gorani 7. On Twitter, it is Berat Gorani KS. Just search my name up now that many people have it. You'll find me. I tried being pretty active. I respond if you want to reach out, go ahead. And then at any live shows that I'm on, I'm always promoting. Usually it's right now in Alberta and Saskatchewan. But if I'm ever going anywhere else, possibly your town or anything, I'll be putting on my social medias.
All right. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you, Sandro.
Thank you for tuning in to Independent Wrestling Profiles. Please help out the show if you can with a like, subscription, or review. We'll see you next time.